instead of just focusing on logos, I would tell people to really focus on the identity piece first, because a logo is it's like the salami on the charcuterie board, right? It's just a piece, right? It's not the full it's not the full board.
Well, I have the pleasure today of being with Josh Passler, the FinArtist. And yeah, a little bit of a tongue twister, but Fin and artist, he put it together, and he is the FinArtist. So we're going to talk a lot about what you're doing today, Josh, and spend a lot of time on that. But I'm so enamored by the entrepreneurial journey. Perhaps you could give our listeners a little background about you, and how did you get up to the point of being the FinArtist? And then we'll spend a great deal of time there, of course.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show. So my journey is very unorthodox. There was no marketing strategy behind it. It was kind of just sheer luck, I guess you could say. But I was a financial advisor here in Omaha for, I guess my journey was about 8.5 years before I found FinArt. And FinArt really just came out of nowhere. It started as more of a networking tool for me. I was creating these portraits on Twitter and LinkedIn because I found about the whole FinTwit LinkedIn community, and I really wanted to add more value to my name. So that's how it all started. It was, instead of just communicating and messaging random advisors and planners to, hop on a call or to pick their brain, I wanted to add value. So I started just sketching them, just from like a comic style to a portrait style of them, and it just took off one day, and it's where it is where it is now, and it's been a fun, great journey.
So have you been an entrepreneur your entire life, or is this something that you just stepped into? I guess being a financial advisor in some ways, depending on how that looked for you, you might have been somewhat of an entrepreneur there. So I don't know if it started there, or did it even start your entrepreneurial journey start even prior to that?
It really started with FinArt. I think I had a little bit of snippets along the way, little things that, that wasn't really official, I guess you could say. But, the FinArt thing, obviously I had to communicate it with my wife and say, hey, is this marketable? Is this something that it can be profitable? Should we run with it and see where it can lead us to? And so about 6 months in, after I started it, I was like, you know what? I'm no longer going to be an advisor. I'm just going to run with it and just see what happens and start planning for the future. So yeah, the entrepreneurial spirit is still alive. It's hungrier than ever. So I love it.
Now, did you just, were you still working as a financial advisor as you transitioned, or did you really just stop cold as a financial advisor and then make that transition to the FinArt side?
It was like a gradual decrease in the workload. The financial planner got to the point where I registered. I took all my licenses and designations over to core planning, and so I'm technically still registered. But I started handing off clients to the other planners, and it got to the point where I was like, you know what, like I don't want to be a part-time planner. Like that would be a huge disservice to the client. And I think not having that focus and attention on their planning would be detrimental to them and to me. And I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Right. So sure. I had to make sure that they got the attention that they deserved. So with that being said, I really focused in on FinArt, and really it was portraits, many, like hundreds of portraits for the first few months. And then it led to illustrations up to where it is now. And right now is more about the brand identity design to create for firms.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because and I was going to go there. So thank you for leading me in that direction, right? Because you talked about making these cartoonish sketches of advisors to kind of get their attention. But that was really just a lead-in, right? That's more or less like in shopping terms, you'd say that was somewhat of a loss leader, right? To get their attention, bring them in. So maybe you could give our listeners a little bit of a 360 view of what FinArt does, what they're all about, and what you're doing today, in addition to the great sketches of advisors out there.
Absolutely. So the FinArt is primarily focusing on brand identity design. I would say primarily focusing on the FinServe industry. That's where a majority of our clients come from. It's helpful that we have this background of being a financial advisor for years, because there's not much explaining that needs to be done, with financial concepts and financial terms, right? We understand it. So it's easier for our clients to work with us, because they don't have to go in depth and explain when we're building out visual concepts on their website or on graphics, right? So it's really about building out that brand identity, and that's where our main focus is right now. So 360 really is just a brand identity with some illustrations and concepts projects still on the table. Like I technically am still doing the 50 Fires podcast covers for their guests for Carl, so that's a lot of fun. I still go to conferences every once in a while and make these unique portraits specifically for those conferences. But I guess the 9 to 5 is the brand identity. It's more like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. because 8 p.m. I need to cut off because my brain doesn't work as creatively as it was at 8 a.m. Right?
There you go. You're gonna end up on Shark Tank, like I forget that guy's name, right? There's a guy who did the cat drawings, right? Very different but similar, I guess, to some degree. And I think Mark Cuban invested in that company. We're a big Shark Tank family, so maybe we'll see you on there eventually. So listen, one of the things I hear you talk about is color a lot, and why do you feel that color really needs to be the starting point for your design and branding? What's the purpose behind that, or what's your guiding principle there?
Yeah, it really is all about color psychology, but the simplest way is the emotions that you get from looking at a certain color. Like when I look at your shirt, I immediately think of, that blue. You can think of trust, safety, but it's bright enough to where you feel, happy, right? So, and you get that from your personality. So the personality and that color matches up perfectly, right? When you think of Coca-Cola, you think about that red, and you think about, what it brings to the table. You can always trust that Coke to taste exactly like it tasted back in 1930 if you're around back then. With the recipe changing a little bit, but for the most part, the colors is the first thing that your brain acknowledges, right? So when you look at any sort of brand, when you look outside, the first thing you think of when you look at like trees is you think of green. You see it, you feel it, you can smell it. Then without color, you don't get any of that. So that's how important color is. It's because, your brain acknowledges it. It'll see it, feel it. All the senses come alive. And that's why it's more important than the actual logo.
So are there key colors for financial folks or for FinArt that you see more often or should see more often as being utilized, or that you utilize on a regular basis?
Yeah. Everyone has probably already answered that question in their own minds when they heard that question, but blue and green are very, very popular colors. Green is money, security. Blue is the same, but blue has more of that trust. That's why you see a lot of banks with blue, like different shades and tints of blue, right? But the green, the money piece, the safety piece is huge as well. You do see you see quite a bit of red too. So I would say 3 primaries are red, blue, and green within our industry, and for a good reason too, because they do offer that security. But it's getting to the point where, like any industry, is becoming oversaturated by just a couple of colors. And so the ones that have a different hue, like they have a purple, they have a pink, they have I was going to say gold, but gold is pretty common too. They have let's say a bright yellow, let's say like a neon yellow. It really stands out. It makes you stop and think, and that's the best piece of it, is that it makes you stop and think and wonder, what is this company doing that's different? Right. How are their products and services different from yours? right? How are they a different, advisor? Are they the same? What are they really, what message are they trying to get across? And so, and that's why my company is pink. I played around with the differentiation tints of pink, but I wanted it to stand out. I was heavily influenced by Robert Sophia's book. And that's how I remember reading it one day. And I looked at my wife and I said, if I ever start a company, I'm going to make it pink because of that book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
lo and behold, it's here. And so thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. And he's heard it, I think, many times before.
All right. Well, we'll definitely give him a shout out in the show notes for you for sure. And, one of the things you said earlier, and I couldn't agree more, right, is, this branding or this art, the color is important because like you said, with my shirt, it may give you the feeling of safety, security, but it also gives you that joy component. Also, there's feelings that are tied in there. So, I mean, are there key elements that need to be in or should be in your branding? Whether you're in financial services or any other profession, I guess it's similar, right? It might be different colors and different feelings you're trying to get people to emote. But at the end of the day, you're really trying to get them to feel connected to your brand, your company, your values, your mission, et cetera. So what are the key elements needed for a business to get people to feel the branding rather than just see it?
That's a great point. So after colors, the shapes play a huge part into that. Shapes can really be a factor in how people perceive what the brand is about. A perfect example is when you look at any sort of like moving company or NASCAR or any like fast-paced moving product, they always have like this italic look to it. They have that slanted rectangle for the most part, and that's the perceived movement, right? But if you're trying to be loud, bold, you want this like very like large box. You want straight cut edges on your brand. If you're going for security, a perfect one is really a upside down triangle. That way it looks more like a shield. That's a perfect one too. But if they're trying to be soft, if they're trying to warm it up like a children's product, right? They have more rounded edges, right? They have a softer tone. They have more of like a palette color. They have, their typography that they use are going to be like rounded edges too. So typically, you want the shapes to match the typography too. So there's different ways you can do it, right? When I look at your book, for instance, in the background, you can already tell like this is even though it's a finance book, it's made personal. And so if you want to have like that conversation, that one-on-one with them through a book, right? You got to have that warm, inviting feeling. And those colors do that immediately, right? It's very disarming. Like, so when they pick it up, they're not going to feel like it's no offense, but it's not going to feel like a Morgan Housel book, right? It's going to feel like, hey, this is made for me. And this is going to give me the stories and the personal testaments to help me get to where I need to be, right? To help me learn. So, I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but everyone does. And they have to judge. So that's how it can all play together.
Yeah, listen, the covers are very important because we work, one of the areas that we work with are with authors, and typically in the romance genre. And we've had authors tell us that they've released a book with one cover, doesn't necessarily hit and or they change the cover, or they put it out in two different distribution formats with two different covers. And ultimately one ends up outselling the other just with a little change of the cover can, generate sales. Because if you think about it, most people are buying their books online these days, right? Not a lot of people are going to the library or the bookstore and holding it and leafing through it. They're really looking at that cover and saying, does this speak to me enough that I'm going to either buy it or take it off the shelves and start reading it, right? So you have to be able to catch them there, which, I think you laid out very nicely. So, one of the things that you work with, is this branding component for businesses. So how do you walk people, firms, through the process of uncovering if their branding speaks to them, right? Because I think to some degree, you have to make this branding speak to the owner, the stakeholders first, right? So that they can get behind it and then show it off to the world, and then hopefully attract families that they're in alignment with. So how do you walk people through that process and making sure that that speaks to them before, unleashing it to the world?
Great question. There's really no secret sauce, and I will say this for the firms I've worked with, it's almost the same process that they have with their own clients, right? And because everyone's trying to figure out that why behind the why behind the why. What really got them started? Why are they there in front of you? Why do they want to be your client? Why do you want to be their advisor, right? That's the most important part. You got to figure out their pain points. We're trying to solve business issues with design. What we're trying to accomplish here, and that's what I always tell them. So just having that open discussion and figuring out exactly like, hey, what are you here for? How can we help? Tell us your story. We want to hear your story, because everyone loves to tell their story. I love to listen to stories and figure out, okay, what part along the way in your journey did you not spend enough time on, what you're here for, and why has that changed? Why are you here now? And what are you trying to solve? So we have, from our questionnaires that we provide them to our brand workshop calls, we gather enough information with research and discovery to figure out exactly why they are here. Why are they in front of us? Because realistically, everybody wants to make money, right? That's the number one goal in business, is to be profitable. But there's something underlying that made them become an advisor in the first place, that's setting them apart from another advisor. If we figure that out, we can then create a design around that instead of just the money aspect of being profitable, right? And if we can design the underlying, passion, if you want to say passion, we can bring that to light, and we can make sure that it ties in with our target audience. And when the target audience sees that, they can now say, that advisor, that firm is meant for me based on what I'm seeing here within the first 7 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Great points. How do you tell, I guess, if you have a firm who's looking to kind of get things moving in the right direction, right? And sometimes it's not a matter of we got to do everything from scratch where we have to do like a total rebrand. Sometimes it's like, hey, this advisor, this firm, they have good fundamentals, but they kind of need a refresh, right? They just need to freshen things up. So how do you, as a business owner, and I think that many of these concepts we're talking about are very transferable, whether you're a financial professional or you run a local business or even a larger business. I think a lot of them are transferable. So how do you know whether or not you simply need a refresh, or actually you should really start from the drawing board and do a total rebrand?
Yeah, it's we've worked with a few firms that do not need a rebrand. They just need a refresh, right? And the refresh comes, because they have amazing foundations. They have the building blocks in place. They're not reaching 100 million in AUM from nothing, right? There's reasons why they've reached certain milestones. There's reasons why they've been decades or a decade in practice, right? So understanding that is huge too. But we also have to really dig in and make sure the client's 100% honest with us and themselves on what's not working. You have a lot of things that are working great, but what's really not working with your firm? And sometimes, advisors and graphic designers, we kind of have to act as like a therapist almost, right? Almost like a Dr. Phil, just like, why are you the way that you are now? But we have to dig in deep. And if a person has a great foundation, and they're like, I don't know if I need a rebrand. Well, you're right. You don't need a rebrand. You have in the perfect example I give of a refresh is you have an amazing house. You have an amazing foundation. Yeah, maybe your siding needs to change. Maybe you had the hailstorm that dented up a little bit over time because your house is like 20 years old. You need a new paint. Maybe let's change up the interior a little bit. Maybe let's get a new address sign so people can see your address more clearly when they drive by for delivery or for parties. maybe we get a new stove in or a better island so people can congregate around when you're having guests in the house, because I love islands.
Right.
But that's what a refresh is. It's not like we're tearing down, we're scraping everything away. A rebrand is where they demolish everything and they're building from the ground up again, to establish that presence. A lot of firms really don't. When firms come to us, they don't really need a rebrand, right? They just need that refresh. And so that's what I like about it, because I get to take things, certain elements from their brand, and just touch it up a little bit and just bring it to light. And a lot of it has to do with not just the colors. Like with colors, we're just changing, maybe we're adding a few colors. Maybe we're just changing like the tints and shades of certain hues. Maybe the messaging is even, clearer for the target audience. Maybe the typefaces have changed a little bit, but it's really we're just touching it up to make it more in line and more cohesive to their target audience is what it is.
Right. So, I'm a big process guy, right? So I'm thinking this through, and I'm like, hey, let's say you have one of those instances where somebody needs a complete rebrand, right? Or let's say they had no real brand, right? They're, hey, I'm growing. I really got to get out there. I got to have, some marketing materials. I got to have a better presence. And even from a rebrand, I think there are some things that, would take place over the course of a life of a business that may warrant a rebrand, right? Maybe there was a merger or acquisition that kind of fundamentally changes the firm. So they're not the firm they were a year ago. So they might need that rebrand. So from a process perspective, you go through this whole process, go through that rebranding with them from the ground up. How do you ensure that the process is constantly moving forward? Because I know, especially advisors, especially in this profession, probably a lot of questions get asked, what if this, what if that? So how do you make sure that, things are consistently and constantly moving in the right direction where you're going to end up meeting that end goal of this rebrand rather than kind of stalling out along the way and not seeing it fully through?
Great question again. Trial and error has helped out quite a bit, but also learning from outside sources. But it's really just making sure that the clients understand this is really a collaborative effort. So you want to make sure that all the decision makers are there, whether they're in that email chain or they're on those calls, right? Because you don't want to do it without, with one decision maker out, that they're not on the calls or emails, because then it might just circle back and keep circling back and it just goes nowhere.
Same with financial planning, right?
Exactly.
You want to have all the stakeholders involved at the table, right? And knowing what's going on. So very similarly.
100%. And I mean, that is huge too. But like from the proposal, there is a page that really communicates like, hey, this is a collaborative partnership. So we're going to be in touch with you quite often. We typically send a weekly email on Fridays to give them an update on where we're at. It might be just a small update. Sometimes it's bigger. And sometimes we'll present them, like we'll create like a Loom video that, presents them like certain ideas that works with them. Because what we don't want to do is say, surprise, this is what we made. And they go, this has nothing to do with us. Like, this looks cool, but it doesn't match anything that we're trying to perceive. I mean, luckily that hasn't happened, but that can easily happen if you keep them out of a loop. Because there are times when we're building out, like, let's say like the logo concepts and, the different logos that, we're kind of, we're just head down, we're building out things. And we might not have a lot of things to tell them, but just a little bit of a response or an update really keeps them in a loop, really makes sure that they know where we're at, so that it's not been like a month or 2 months of, 2 months of no communication. But we have something in our proposal where it says like, hey, this is when we'll touch base with you. And we give them access to a Notion page that tells them like when we'll reach out to them, or we'll hop on a call, or when they're going to get a presentation. So they're very in the loop about that. So really it comes down to just having that open communication with them, updating them frequently, and making sure that they know where we're at. Sometimes scheduling, those calls can get crosswired a little bit, as in like they're busy, we're busy on a certain date, but we always get the job done. But having that frequent communication has been a huge priority this year, and it has paid off tremendously because now all of our clients and us are on the same page. There has been no barriers, no confusion, and we're very quick to respond to anything our clients ask us to do.
Yeah. It sounds like you're a process guy too, which keeps that on task, which is great. So one of my favorite people, Matt Halloran, I heard him refer to you as a design mind in quotes, his quotes. So how do you, right, as an artist, go from a design mind, right, and transition that design to finishing out a brand? Is that something you find very simple and natural, or is it a little bit more difficult for you?
When it comes to finishing out a design, I will say if I am the primary designer and it is like, let's say the client has chosen my direction, from the logos to the colors to the typography to the art direction, the photo direction, and then it's very easy for me to build it out and finish it. Like it's easy. But if it's not my logo that they chose, because I've worked with a couple of other designers, it's hard for me to visualize it and to build it out. I mean, it's not very tough, but it is different because then I am now communicating with the designer that build a logo and say like, what's your eye for the visual elements, the website? Like, what are you visualizing for all of this? Let me get inside that mind so I can help you build it out. So at that point, then it's switching from like a design mind to almost like a creative director mind, to help to make sure that the client is getting the right direction and that everything is cohesive. So it is like switching design to creative director back to design to help build it out. But for the most part, it is a design mind, and it's pretty easy to do. But as we continue to grow and as we bring on more designers, I might have to take a step back on the design aspect and kind of be that creative director and help build it out, and probably just be a better, just be like the lead communicator with the clients. But that hasn't happened yet. It probably won't happen for a few more years, but when it does, I'll be ready.
Great. Yeah. As the business, goes through its evolution, things change, your role changes, right? It's like the person who started the bakery and they were the baker and they were keeping the books. And then next thing they know, they are no longer baking, which was really the love of their life, and they're running a business and they're like, how did this happen? Right. So it's not much different there. So, one thing I want to ask you, because I want to leave this for our listeners, because I think this is important, because I think a lot of people think about branding, they put time, effort, and energy in thinking, are there places, or what is the best place for people to go to kind of learn about branding? Maybe, whether that's through you or, other resources that are out there to help them navigate that process?
That's a great question. They can absolutely follow me. That's perfectly fine. I love to build in public. But where I'll tell them where I've learned my stuff. So sure. You can learn a lot just by looking up the top designers. Paul Rand being like an iconic designer, not Rand Paul, but Paul Rand. Amazing designer. He actually designed the Morningstar logo. So there's proof right there. And he did that in the 60s, and they haven't changed it at all. So listening to him, I think he actually has a Netflix documentary that talks about his design process, which is awesome. Understanding your identity is huge before you build out the visual piece, right? So if you're wanting to learn more about that, then the book How the World Sees You by Sally Hogshead is a great source. That's a great book to read and learn and about the different archetypes, and you can take a quiz on which archetype you are and see if that matches up with your brand. And if you're not sure if your brand looks the part, and then you read that book and you figure out your archetype, then you're putting two to two together, right? The archetype is really your North Star. And we do that for all of our clients. We put them through like a quiz to figure out what their archetype is, because that is their North Star, and helping them determine the identity piece. And then we go into the visual aspect of the brand design. But another great piece is a huge idol of mine is Alan Peters. Alan is spelled Allan, and he just created a book about logo identity and his process, and that's been a huge, wonderful thing to read and learn from. But instead of just focusing on logos, I would tell people to really focus on the identity piece first, because a logo is it's like the salami on a charcuterie board, right? It's just a piece, right? It's not the full board. So anything that they can do, I would say just Google brand identity. I'm trying to think here if I have. Oh, here's the book, How the World Sees You by Sally
Right.
Hogshead.
Yeah.
It Her last name reminds me of Hogsmeade from Harry Potter, so there's that. So like that. But really, I mean, any book by David Airy, this book called ID is the identity design, the definitive guide to visual branding. That's a huge piece too. But as you can see, I try to get my hand on any design book. But yeah, there's many different routes that you can take. All I can say is that if you truly are interested, then just start with a podcast, start with an audiobook, start with anything that you can find on Google, and you'll just go down a rabbit hole and you'll find success.
Great resources. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna check out How the World Sees You. I'm gonna check that one out myself. So thank you for that. So listen, it's been great having you on. We talked about joy earlier, about the color of my shirt and whatnot, and we're all about joy here. So we ask each of our guests the same last question, which is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
What I did today, I had to take my mother to her doctor's appointment today, and so I don't normally talk to her in the morning, but that drive and being with her in the hospital and keeping her company and making her feel safe was huge joy. Typically, I have to consume a lot of caffeine to get into the right mindset, but just being there, listening to her, and just having a talk with her, it just kind of kicked things into gear. And it's a Monday, so everyone kind of starts a little bit slower.
Sure.
But after I left, I don't know, I felt like I just revved an engine, and I was like, all right, let's go. It's time to make Mama proud. So
Awesome.
So that brought me joy.
Awesome. Well, I hope everything went smoothly with her at the doctor, and it went as good as expected. And listen, Josh, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we're going to have all of your information in the show notes. But if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, learn more about the FinArtist, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
My website, thefinartist.com. All my social handles on there too, but on LinkedIn and Twitter is the FinArtist, or my first and last name, Josh Passler. You can find me on there. If you have any questions, do not feel like I'm the type of person that will just ghost you. I love talking about this, so just shoot me a DM if you have any questions. I love to give any tips, anything like that. So I'm an open book, so fire away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you for sharing your nuggets today on our show. I really appreciate it. And I thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.